I was 68 years old the day I finally snapped. I remember it like it was yesterday. The day I took a frying pan and smashed it across my son-in-law's head while he was yelling in my face. My hands shook, my heart raced, and for the first time in 26 years, he looked afraid of me. Blood trickled down his forehead, and he stumbled backward, holding his head in shock. My daughter screamed. Not because I was bleeding. Not because I had been slapped across the face just 5 minutes earlier. She screamed because her husband was hurt. And that was the moment I knew. I had been nothing but a prisoner in my own daughter's house. Let me take you back to how it all began. My name is Mary. I'm a mother, a grandmother, and now, someone I don't even recognize in the mirror anymore. My husband died when I was 42, leaving me with only our daughter, Cynthia. Back then, we were so close. She was my only child, and I did everything for her. Paid her way through school, cooked her meals, even stayed up many nights when she had fever or heartbreak. When she met Daniel at 24, I was happy. He seemed respectful, educated, and soft-spoken. He visited me with gifts, always called me Mama, and promised to take care of Cynthia. They got married in a small ceremony at our church, and for the first time in years, I saw joy on Cynthia's face. I prayed every night, thanking God for sending a good man into her life. But I didn't know. The devil dresses like a gentleman. At first, it started small. I moved into their house after Daniel insisted I come live with them, so I wouldn't be alone after the burial of my sister. Mama, this house is big, he said. We need your presence here. I was touched. I packed my bags and moved in, not knowing I was walking into my own cage. The first time he insulted me, it was over salt. I had added too much to the soup. He spat it out and shouted, "Is this how you've been feeding people your whole life? No wonder your husband died early." Cynthia stood by, silent. My heart broke. I went to my room and cried. I tried to forgive him. I convinced myself he was just having a bad day. But the insults continued. Every small mistake, tea too hot, the TV too loud, forgetting to put the toilet seat down, turned into screaming matches. He called me names. Useless. Old cargo. Rotten woman. Still I stayed. Because of Cynthia. Because I thought, if I left she would suffer. Years passed, and the abuse grew. He began hiding my medications. Once I had a fever and couldn't find my pills. When I asked him if he had seen them, he laughed and said, "Maybe it's your time to go." And Cynthia? She said nothing. Sometimes I even saw her smiling when he mocked me. It was like she had become another person. The same child who used to hug me tightly was now locking me in my room, so I could rest better. I kept thinking maybe she was just afraid of him too. Maybe she had her own scars. But the truth was colder than that. Cynthia had chosen him over me. Even on my birthdays there were no cakes. No wishes. Just Daniel saying, "You should be grateful you're still alive." I tried to leave one time. Packed my small bag. But Cynthia blocked the door. "Where do you want to go, Mama? Who do you think wants to take care of you now?" So I stayed. Another year. Then another. Until 26 years had passed. I became a ghost in that house. Cooking, cleaning, folding their clothes. Watching them laugh together while I sat alone. Until that one day when I was washing the dishes and Daniel walked in angry, because I had broken one of his fancy plates. He slapped me so hard my hearing went numb. And when Cynthia walked in and saw me bleeding from the ear, she walked right past me to hug him. That was the day I lost it. The frying pan was sitting on the stove. I grabbed it without thinking and slammed it against his head. He screamed. Cynthia screamed louder. My hands were shaking, but I didn't drop the pan. I looked at them both and said, "If you ever touch me again, one of us won't leave this house alive." Daniel held his head, blood running between his fingers. Cynthia ran to call for help. But I knew it was too late to save anything. I had become someone else. Something else. And I hadn't even told them my secret yet. The real reason I had stayed all these years. Because I knew something about Daniel that he thought I didn't. Something that could destroy everything. They rushed Daniel to the hospital that day. The frying pan had left a deep gash just above his eyebrow, and he needed stitches. Cynthia didn't look at me once as they left. She didn't even ask if I was okay after he slapped me. All she cared about was him. But I didn't cry this time. I didn't hide in my room or beg for forgiveness. I sat on the living room couch, staring at the spot where his blood had dropped on the floor. My hand still tingled from the blow. And for the first time in 26 years I felt powerful. That night they didn't come back. I was alone in the house. I boiled water, made tea, and sipped it slowly in silence. And that was when the memories started crawling back like spiders in my mind. The very first time Daniel hit Cynthia, I had seen it with my own eyes. It was 6 months after they got married. She came out of the bedroom with a swollen lip, claiming she fell in the bathroom. But I wasn't stupid. I knew what a punch looked like. When I tried to ask her, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Please don't say anything." He promised it won't happen again. And I kept quiet. I didn't want to ruin her marriage. I thought it was just a mistake. But mistakes don't come with black eyes and bruised ribs. Years later I caught him cheating. Yes, I saw him. One Sunday afternoon he said he was going to church early to help with parking duty. He forgot his phone. It buzzed nonstop. I picked it up. Messages from a woman saved as DHL delivery. I opened them and saw everything. Pictures. Hotel bookings. Voice notes. When I showed Cynthia, she snatched the phone from my hand and told me to mind my business. That's when I realized. She had made her choice. I had no one to run to. My siblings were dead. My husband long gone. The only person I had left in this world had chosen a monster over her own mother. The next morning after the frying pan incident, Cynthia came home alone. I was in the kitchen boiling yam. She entered and stood there watching me. Her face was blank. No tears. No anger. "You embarrassed us," she said coldly. I didn't reply. I dropped the knife and turned to her. "Us?" I asked. "Cynthia, that man slapped your mother. He humiliated me in front of you. He made my life a living hell for 26 years. She rolled her eyes. "Mama, you're being dramatic. It's not that deep. You could have just walked away." I nearly dropped to my knees from shock. Not that deep. Was that all my suffering had meant to her? You watched him insult me, hit me, steal from me, humiliate me. And you call that dramatic? I whispered. She shrugged. You always wanted to be the victim. Always made things about you. Daniel is my husband, Mama. I need to stand by him. He's not perfect, but at least he provides. I stared at her in silence. Then I said, I wish I never gave birth to you. She flinched. For the first time I saw pain in her eyes. But I didn't take the words back. She deserved them. That night I made a decision. I would leave that house. But not before telling them what I knew. The secret I had kept hidden for years. Daniel wasn't just a cheater. He was a thief. I had watched him slowly move money out of Cynthia's accounts without her noticing. I had seen the papers where he transferred her late father's land in his name. The same land her father had saved for her future. And I had kept copies. Back then, I thought maybe if I stayed silent, things would get better. That he would change. But now, I realized that staying silent only made me his prisoner. So I waited for the right moment. A few days later, Daniel came home from the hospital. His head was bandaged and he was quiet. Too quiet. Cynthia followed behind him like a lost puppy. He didn't look at me. I placed an envelope on the dining table. This is for both of you, I said. Cynthia picked it up and opened it. Inside were photocopies, bank statements, land documents, photos of him kissing a strange woman in a car. What is this? She whispered. Daniel looked up. Then looked at me. I smiled. Evidence. Real evidence. You thought I was just some old woman sitting in your house watching TV. But I was watching you. Every time you thought I was sleeping. I was listening. Cynthia's hand trembled. Daniel's face went pale. If you ever lay a finger on me again, I continued, I'll send copies of this to the police, your office, and the church you lie to every Sunday. Daniel got up from the chair. His fists clenched. For a moment I thought he'd try to hit me again. But something stopped him. Fear. The kind of fear he had never shown me before. But that peace didn't last long. 2 days later, I went to the market to buy tomatoes and came home to find all my things outside the gate. My bags. My Bible. My medications. Even my late husband's photo frame. Cynthia had locked the gate. I knocked for an hour. No answer. Then a little girl from next door came out and said, "Auntie Cynthia say make I tell you say you no day welcome again." I stood there in the sun, my heart breaking into tiny pieces. After 26 years of enduring pain for her, she had thrown me out like garbage. I sat on my back, tears rolling down my cheeks. Neighbors passed. Some stared. No one said anything. But then a red car pulled up. I looked up, confused, and my heart skipped a beat. It was him, a man from my past, one who knew the truth about Daniel long before I did. He stepped out of the car in a neat white shirt and black trousers. Still tall, still calm, still carrying that same quiet strength he had back then. "Mary," he said gently. I wiped my face, not sure if I was dreaming. "Edward." My voice cracked. He gave a small nod, then glanced down at my belongings scattered by the gate. "What happened to you?" he asked. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. My hands trembled. He didn't wait for an answer. He walked over, picked up 2 of my bags and said, "Come. You're not staying here another second." Edward was my late husband's closest friend. After my husband died, Edward had checked in on me from time to time, but Daniel never liked him. In fact, he once told me that Edward wasn't welcome in our home. And I, being the weak version of myself back then, had agreed. I pushed him away to avoid Daniel's anger. I hadn't spoken to Edward in over 20 years. But there he was now, like an angel, when I had no one else. He drove me to his house, a small but clean bungalow in the next town. His daughter had married and moved abroad, so the house was mostly empty. "You can stay here as long as you want," he said, handing me a glass of water. I looked around, still in disbelief. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "After all these years?" He smiled softly. "Because I knew you'd need someone one day. And because you're not the only one with secrets about Daniel." That made my heart jump. I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Edward sighed and sat across from me. "I never told you this before, but I had my suspicions about him from the beginning. He wasn't who he claimed to be. I did a background check on him the year Cynthia married him." My eyes widened. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried, but you were too deep in their lives. And Daniel, he had a way of turning people against each other. I saw it coming, but I was too late. He changed his name years ago. Was caught in a land fraud case in Port Harcourt. Escaped charges because the woman he scammed mysteriously disappeared." I gasped. Edward pulled out an old envelope from a drawer. Inside were faded newspaper clippings and a black and white photo of a younger Daniel. Same eyes, same smirk, but a different name underneath, David Nelson. "He's not just a thief," Edward said. "He's dangerous." My head was spinning. All these years I had feared him, obeyed him, endured his insults. And now I was finally hearing the truth I had long suspected but was too afraid to face. I stayed with Edward for 2 weeks. He treated me with the kindness I had forgotten existed. We cooked together, prayed, even laughed. A sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. But peace doesn't last when evil is chasing you. One morning, we heard a loud knock on the gate. Edward peeked through the curtain and his face darkened. "It's Cynthia," he said. I stood frozen. The knock turned into banging. "Mama, I know you're in there. Open this gate before I call the police." "Police? For what?" Edward opened the gate cautiously. Cynthia stormed in, eyes blazing. "How dare you run off with our documents? Do you know what you've done? Daniel lost his contract. He said if that land deal fails, it'll be your fault." I stepped forward. "That land belonged to Daddy, not him. And you know it." Cynthia turned to me, shaking. "I don't care anymore, Mama. You're selfish. You've always been selfish. You ruined everything." I felt like someone punched me in the chest. "Selfish? I gave you everything," I whispered. "My life, my health, my freedom." She didn't listen. She pulled out her phone. "I'm giving you 24 hours to return that evidence or I swear." Edward stepped between us. "You'll do what? Drag your own mother to jail? After what your husband did to her?" "She's lying," Cynthia shouted. Then something happened I didn't expect. Edward walked to his drawer, pulled out a voice recorder, and played a clip. Daniel's voice, clear as day, saying, "I don't care what the papers say. Once I get that land in my name, I'll sell it and dump her. That old woman's days are numbered anyway." Cynthia froze. I watched her face go from rage, to confusion, to something like shame. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. Where did you get that?" she asked softly. "I have friends," Edward said. "People who've been watching Daniel for years." Cynthia sat down, shaking her head. "I didn't know. I didn't. He said he loved me. I sat beside her, but I didn't reach for her hand. I had done that too many times before. Now you see who you chose over your own mother." She started to cry, deep sobs that came from her belly. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't say anything, because I knew something she didn't know yet. Daniel had discovered where I was, and what came next would change all our lives forever. The phone rang at exactly 3:17 a.m. Edward and I were both asleep in the living room. He had insisted I sleep in the guest room, but I had gotten used to sleeping on couches after 26 years of silence. I jolted awake, heart thumping. Edward grabbed the phone. It was a private number. He answered with a cautious voice. "Hello." Then I heard it. That voice. Smooth, calm, deadly. "Tell the old witch her days are numbered," Daniel said coldly. "She messed with the wrong man. I'm going to burn that house to the ground, with her inside it." Edward froze. My mouth went dry. There was a click. Silence. We didn't speak for a few seconds. Then Edward put the phone down and locked all the windows. "I'll call a friend in the police," he said. "He owes me one." But I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, remembering all the quiet ways Daniel had tortured me. Now he wanted to kill me. The next day, Cynthia returned. This time she came with a small suitcase and her eyes swollen from crying. "I left him," she said at the door, voice cracking. "I walked out last night after he said he didn't care if you died." Edward stepped aside to let her in, but I didn't move. I stared at her long and hard. "You stood by for 26 years, I said slowly. "Why now?" Cynthia broke down in front of me. "Because I didn't see it before. I was blind, Mama. He made me believe everything was your fault. He said you hated me, that you were jealous of him, that you were trying to destroy our marriage." My lip trembled. "And you believed him?" She nodded, her face buried in her hands. "I was stupid." Edward walked to the kitchen to give us space. Cynthia reached for my hand. "Please forgive me. I didn't just fail you. I betrayed you." I didn't know what to say. My heart had been hardened by years of silence. Forgiveness wasn't something that came easily anymore. But deep down, she was still my daughter. And I knew she had been brainwashed. I nodded slowly. "We're not safe yet," I said. "Daniel knows where I am. And he won't stop." Cynthia looked up. "I'll testify. I'll help you bring him down." Edward returned and placed a folder on the table. "These are all the documents," he said. "Bank fraud, identity change, stolen land. If we present these to the right people, he'll fall." We agreed to go to the police the next morning. Edward's friend, Officer Harris, was expecting us. But we didn't make it. That night, around 2 a.m., a stone crashed through Edward's front window. Then another. Then another. Then came the fire. A bottle flew through the back window, wrapped in cloth and soaked in fuel. It burst into flames the moment it hit the curtain. "Get out! Fire!" Edward yelled, grabbing a fire extinguisher and rushing toward the smoke. I screamed and dragged Cynthia by the arm. The house was filling with heat. Smoke stung my eyes. We made it out through the back door. Edward followed a few seconds later, coughing, his shirt black with soot. Neighbors rushed out in their pajamas. One man brought a hose. Another called the fire service. As we watched the flames eat through the house, I saw it. A man. Across the road. Standing under a tree. Daniel. He was watching it all burn. And he was smiling. Before I could scream, he turned and disappeared into the darkness. The police came an hour later. Took statements. Promised to investigate. But I knew better. Daniel had money. He had influence. And he wasn't going to stop. We lost everything that night. Edward's house. His documents. The printed evidence. All gone. But what Daniel didn't know was that I had a backup. A final card he hadn't counted on. A voice recording. Tucked inside my brassiere that night, safe from flames and thieves. A full 43-minute recording from 2 weeks ago, where Daniel confessed everything to a friend on the phone. Fraud. Beating Cynthia. Plans to take my pension. His affair with the woman posing as his business assistant. I had recorded it from his office phone using a small device Edward bought for me. Now it was our last hope. But before we could hand it to the police, something worse happened. The next morning, I woke up in the temporary shelter Edward's friend arranged for us. Cynthia was gone. Her bed was empty. No note. No message. Gone. I rushed out barefoot, screaming her name. Then Edward's phone rang. A strange voice answered on the other end. "If you want to see your daughter alive again," the voice said, "you'll bring the recording to St. John's Cemetery by 10 p.m. tonight." I froze. Edward stood beside me, his face pale as ash. The phone was still pressed to his ear, but the call had already ended. My knees gave way, and I collapsed onto the wooden bench in the shelter's front yard. My daughter, Cynthia, had been taken. Not again. Not after everything. Edward helped me sit up straight. "We'll get her back," he said. His voice was calm, but I saw fear in his eyes too. "What if he hurts her?" I whispered. "What if he kills her?" Edward clenched his jaw. "He won't. He still thinks you're weak. He doesn't know what we're capable of now." I held the small voice recorder in my hand like it was my own beating heart. This little thing held everything. The truth. My only weapon. But now it had become a bargaining chip. The sun was setting. The sky was gray and moody, like it knew something terrible was coming. We had no police backup. Edward had tried calling Officer Harris, but he was suddenly out of town and couldn't help. We both knew what that meant. Daniel had reached him too. By 8 p.m., Edward prepared a plan. He hid a small GPS tracker inside the recorder and taped a second voice recorder to his wrist, ready to capture any conversation tonight. He would come with me, but we had to make it look like I came alone. At 9:30 p.m., we drove toward St. John's Cemetery. An old, overgrown place at the edge of town where beggars didn't even sleep. I could barely breathe. My hands were ice cold. And the wind outside howled like ghosts were warning me not to go. We parked a street away and continued on foot. Each step was like walking into a nightmare. The graveyard gate creaked as we pushed it open. It smelled of damp leaves, broken stone, and something rotting. I held the recorder tight in my sweater pocket and walked forward, heart thumping like a war drum. Then I saw them. Cynthia was tied to a tree, her mouth gagged, her eyes wide with fear. And beside her, Daniel. He looked worse than before. Gaunt. Desperate. Shirt half-buttoned. Face twitching like he hadn't slept in days. "Well, well," he said, stepping out from the shadows. "The Queen Mother herself finally shows up." I stopped a few feet away. "Let her go, Daniel." He laughed. "You think you're in charge now? You think a little recording can undo everything I built? You ruined my life, old woman." "You ruined your own life," I said firmly. "Let her go. You can have the recorder." He took a step forward, holding a machete. "I should have ended you a long time ago." Edward, hiding behind a crypt, pressed the second recorder. I pulled the voice recorder from my pocket and held it up. "This is your last chance. Let Cynthia go, or I press one button, and this goes viral. Every church, every client, every politician you've worked with will hear the truth." He stopped, breathing hard, thinking. But then he lunged. Faster than I expected. He grabbed my arm and twisted it hard. I screamed and dropped the recorder. "No!" Edward shouted, running out of hiding. Daniel turned, swung the machete, and slashed Edward across the arm. Edward groaned and fell. Cynthia screamed behind the gag, thrashing in her ropes. I dove to the ground and reached for the recorder, but Daniel kicked it away. "You're all going to disappear tonight," he growled. "All three of you." Then something happened. Headlights. Bright. Blinding. A loud voice shouted. "Drop the weapon. Police." Daniel froze. Two officers emerged from the bushes, guns raised. One of them, Officer Harris. He wasn't out of town after all. Turns out Edward had sent a copy of the audio file to one of Harris's junior colleagues just in case. The backup worked. Daniel tried to run, but one officer tackled him to the ground. Screams. Handcuffs. Blood. Cynthia cried as an officer untied her. I stood there shaking, heart thudding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. Edward clutched his bleeding arm and gave me a weak thumbs up. We were alive. But something inside me had cracked open. A pain deeper than bones. A grief older than time. Because even though Daniel was arrested, I had lost my daughter for 26 years. And nothing would bring those years back. The ambulance arrived to check our wounds. The police took our statements. Daniel sat in the back of the van, his face pressed against the bars, looking at me like he still had one more secret to keep. As they drove off, I knew this wasn't over. Because Daniel wasn't acting alone. Someone else had helped him. And I was going to find out who. It was supposed to be over. Daniel was in police custody. Cynthia was safe. Edward's arm was stitched up. The audio recording had been accepted into evidence. On paper, it looked like we had won. But I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear anymore, but because of the questions burning inside me. Who helped Daniel? How did he know where we were staying after Edward's house burned? How did he know about the recording? Unless someone close to us told him. The next morning, while Edward was at the clinic for his dressing change, I sat with Cynthia outside the shelter. She held a cup of tea but barely sipped it. She looked fragile, like the little girl I raised, not the woman who once turned her back on me. I know this is hard, I said gently, but I need to ask you something. She looked up slowly. Did you tell Daniel where I was staying? She flinched, eyes widening. No. I swear I didn't. Did you tell anyone else? She hesitated. Just one person. I was scared and confused. I called Aunt Sarah. I needed someone to talk to. My heart stopped. Sarah, my late husband's cousin. She had always disliked me, ever since we got married. We hadn't spoken properly in over 10 years. But she had always been close to Daniel. Said he reminded her of what a real man should be. I stood up, fists clenched. Of course. That snake of a woman had been feeding Daniel information the whole time. She was the one who came to the house years ago and said, "You're lucky Cynthia married a man like him. You better respect your position in that house." She had always wanted me humiliated. Now I knew who to face. Where does she stay? I asked Cynthia. Cynthia looked frightened. Mama, please. Don't go looking for more trouble. We're safe now. No, child, I said coldly. We're not safe until we cut off every root of the poison. Daniel is the axe, but Sarah is the hand that swung it. That evening, I went to Sarah's house alone. She lived in a large 2-story house with painted iron gates, decorated flower pots, and a holy cross above the door like she was some kind of saint. I knocked. She answered with a false smile. Mary, she said, pretending to be surprised. What a shock. I stepped inside without asking. She followed me with a frown. What's the meaning of this? You betrayed me, I said simply. You told Daniel where I was. You helped him plan everything. You've been whispering in Cynthia's ears for years, turning her against me. She laughed, cold and bitter. You're too old to be this paranoid. I don't talk to criminals. You don't. I pulled out my phone. Then explain this. I played a voice note I received that morning from an unknown number. An accidental recording of Sarah on a call. She's staying in that small church shelter with that man. I told Daniel already. He should handle it quietly before the old woman ruins everything. Sarah's face drained of color. You recorded me, she gasped. No. One of your neighbors did. You were too loud. She stepped back, trembling. So what? I was protecting my family. You've always been a burden, Mary. Always pretending to be a victim. You made Cynthia weak. I stepped closer, rage boiling in my chest. No. You made her blind. And you helped a criminal abuse an old woman for 26 years. You have no proof, she spat. I held up the phone. This is enough for conspiracy to commit arson. And attempted murder. She lunged at me to grab the phone, but I was ready. I slapped her. Not out of anger, but out of pain. Years of pain. She froze, eyes wide. You just hit me? For every night I cried alone, I said. For every bruise your precious Daniel gave me while you watched. And for the daughter I lost to your poison. Then I walked out. I went straight to the police station and handed over the voice note. The officer on duty promised to add it to the investigation. I returned to the shelter just after sunset. Cynthia and Edward were waiting outside, pacing nervously. When they saw me, Cynthia ran and hugged me tight. Where were you? She cried. Finishing what I started, I whispered. But just as I thought the storm was passing, Edward's phone rang. This time it was from a prison official. He answered, and his eyes darkened. He looked at me slowly. Mary, he said, voice shaking. Daniel's not in custody anymore. I blinked. What? He escaped last night. Disguised himself as a paramedic during the hospital checkup. Slipped out with help from the inside. I dropped to my knees. No words. No breath. Just one sound in my ears. Daniel's voice from the cemetery echoing like a curse. You're all going to disappear tonight. And now he was free again. Hiding somewhere. Waiting. Watching. The sky outside turned dark as thunder rumbled in the distance. But the storm brewing in my chest was louder than any rain cloud. Daniel had escaped. After everything we fought through, the evidence, the fire, the cemetery, the arrest, he was free again. And not just free, angry, wounded, and dangerous. I couldn't believe it. I sat silently on the bed in the shelter, hands shaking. Cynthia crouched in the corner with her arms wrapped around her knees. Edward stood by the window, watching shadows dance in the streetlight. He's coming for us, I finally whispered. Edward didn't argue. He knew it too. We all did. How could the prison let him walk out like that? Cynthia said, her voice tight with panic. Weren't there guards? Cameras. There were, Edward said. But Daniel's friends are powerful. He probably bribed someone inside. I looked up. He won't just come back to hurt me. He'll come for all of us. Me, you, Edward. Anyone who stood in his way. Cynthia began to cry again, her body rocking with every sob. I didn't go to her this time. I had no more soft words left. I had spent 26 years drowning in silence. Now I had to be strong. For all of us. We need to disappear, Edward said quietly. Go somewhere new. Change phones. New names if we have to. I looked at him and saw something I hadn't seen in years, a spark of fear. And Edward wasn't the kind of man who scared easily. We can't run forever, I said. What happens if he finds us again? What happens if the police never catch him? Cynthia stood up suddenly. I can't live like this. I can't keep hiding. She reached into her bag and pulled out something I never expected. A loaded voice recorder. I have my own copy, she said. The day you showed me the first one, I made a duplicate and kept it hidden. I added more recordings too. Phone calls. Messages. Even the one where he threatened to poison you, Mama. I stared at her, stunned. She handed the recorder to Edward. I was scared before. But not anymore. I want to go to court. I want to tell the world what he did to us. I want to bury his name. Edward gave a nod, then looked at me. We can take this straight to a judge, he said. If we go fast, we might be able to get a warrant and freeze his accounts. Maybe even track his phone. I nodded slowly. Do it. The next morning, we left the shelter and moved into a secured safe house Edward's friend arranged. Thick gates. Hidden cameras. Armed guard outside. Cynthia gave her full statement at the police headquarters. The recorder was handed to the chief inspector himself. For the first time since the nightmare began, we felt like justice might finally catch up with the devil. But Daniel, he wasn't done yet. 2 nights later, I received a message on my phone. No number. Just a photo. Of me. Taken from behind. Outside the safe house gate. Followed by one line. You can run, Mama, but you'll never rest. I dropped the phone. Edward picked it up, his face darkening. He's been watching us. We alerted the police and they increased security. But something inside me snapped that night. I couldn't live like a prisoner anymore. Not after surviving 26 years in hell. I wanted it to end. For real. The next morning I made a decision. I want to bait him, I said. Edward's eyes widened. No, Mary. Absolutely not. But I was firm. I'll lure him out. I know him. I know his pride. If he thinks I'm alone unprotected, he'll come. Cynthia gasped. You're not doing that. He's not a man. He's a monster. That's why we need to end this once and for all, I said. Edward hesitated, then sighed. If we do this, we do it right. Hidden cameras. Police on standby. No mistakes. We set the trap for the following Friday. I would return to my old house, the same one Daniel once threw me out of, and act like I had come back alone, weak and full of regrets. Cynthia leaked the news through Sarah's old friend, who was more than happy to pass it on. Then we waited. I sat on the living room couch in my old torn wrapper, Bible in hand, TV playing softly in the background. The door was unlocked. And I prayed, Lord, if tonight is my night to die, let it be quick. But if not, let him fall at my feet. Hours passed. Then the door creaked open. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Familiar. I didn't turn. I knew it was him. He stood behind me, breathing like a beast. Miss me, Mama? Daniel whispered. And then, I heard the click of a pistol. The click of the pistol echoed in the silence like a scream. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, staring straight ahead at the dusty old wall, my Bible still resting in my lap. I could feel Daniel's breath on the back of my neck. You set me up, he said softly, almost like he was hurt. You think I'm stupid? I stayed quiet. He stepped closer until I could feel the cold steel of the gun pressed gently against my shoulder. You wanted to trick me into walking into your little trap. That's cute, Mama. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I could hear the buzzing sound from the tiny hidden camera Edward had planted in the ceiling fan. I just needed to keep him talking, long enough for the police to move in. After everything I did for this family, Daniel continued, his voice trembling with rage. You turned my own daughter against me. You made her believe I was the enemy. I turned my head slightly, not enough to face him but enough to let him know I wasn't afraid. You were the enemy. You've always been. His hand grabbed my hair and yanked it back. I bit down the cry that was rising in my throat. You think I won't shoot you right now? He hissed. I've killed dogs on the street for less than what you've done. I looked up at the corner of the room, where the tiny camera light blinked red. Then do it, I said. Go on. Prove to the whole world what kind of demon you are. He froze. I could feel his hand shaking. Suddenly there was a loud bang outside. Then shouting. Daniel cursed under his breath. You called them here. You called them. I heard him back away, his footsteps quick and wild as he ran toward the back door. I stood up fast, shouting. He's escaping through the back. Within seconds, Edward and the officers rushed in through the front. Cynthia was right behind them, breathless and scared. They chased him. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, my hands trembling. My knees finally gave way and I collapsed to the ground, sobbing. Minutes later they returned. But not with Daniel. He had vanished again. He ran into the canal behind the house, Edward said breathlessly. We lost him. But we'll find him, Mary. We'll find him. I'm tired, I whispered. I'm tired of running. Tired of hiding. I want my life back. Cynthia sat beside me and wrapped her arms around me. We'll get it back, Mama. I promise. For the next few days, the house was guarded like a prison. Daniel's photo was plastered on every news channel, his crimes now public knowledge. More women came forward with stories, former church members, workers from his old company, even a neighbor who said she once saw him burn someone's clothes in the backyard and dump the ashes. He was now a wanted criminal. But still, he was out there, watching, waiting. And then, just when we thought the storm had passed, I got a call. From a hospital. Is this Mary Gordon? A woman's voice asked. Yes. There's been an incident. A man was brought in with third-degree burns and severe head trauma. He had your name written on a paper in his pocket. I stood up slowly. What man? He says his name is Daniel. I nearly dropped the phone. Cynthia and Edward rushed to my side. We arrived at the hospital an hour later. The nurse led us to the intensive care unit. Through the glass window, I saw a body wrapped in bandages, his face swollen, skin scorched. Tubes everywhere. He was found unconscious in a warehouse fire downtown, the doctor explained. No ID. But he kept mumbling your name. I stared through the glass, unsure if I felt fear or relief. Is he going to live? Edward asked. The doctor sighed. We don't know yet. He's in a coma. But if he does wake up, he may never walk again. I said nothing. I just stood there, looking at the man who once stood like a god in my house, now lying helpless, powerless. Then I turned and walked away. But that night, the nightmares returned. Daniel, standing in fire, calling my name. And the worst part? In the dream, he opened his eyes. I woke up screaming. My bedsheets were soaked in sweat. My chest rose and felt like I had been running for miles. Cynthia rushed into the room and held me tightly. Mama, it was just a dream, she whispered, rocking me back and forth like I was her child. You're safe. You're here. He's in the hospital. I tried to calm my breath, but the image of Daniel's eyes opening in the fire refused to leave me. I saw him, I whispered. I saw him looking right at me. And he was smiling. Cynthia didn't say anything. She just held me tighter. Later that morning, we got a call from the hospital. Daniel had regained consciousness. He's awake. I asked, my hands trembling as I held the phone. Yes, the doctor replied. He can't speak clearly yet, but he's aware. And he's asking for you. I hung up and turned to Cynthia. He wants to see me. She looked worried. Do you want to go? I nodded slowly. Yes. I need to. We arrived at the hospital by noon. Edward came along, insisting he wasn't going to let me walk into that room alone. Daniel was barely recognizable. Half of his face was burned. One eye was swollen shut. His hands were bandaged, and his voice was a dry whisper when I stepped inside. He looked up at me. And Mary? I sat down beside his bed. The silence between us was heavy. You still alive? I said flatly. He blinked slowly. God kept me. I almost laughed. Don't bring God into this. Not now. Not after 26 years of turning my life into a nightmare. He coughed. It sounded like gravel grinding in his throat. I didn't know what I was doing, he muttered. Liar, I snapped. You knew. Every slap. Every cruel word. Every time you locked me out in the rain. You knew. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I stood up. Don't say sorry because you're weak now. Say sorry because you mean it. He didn't reply. I turned and walked out, tears stinging my eyes, not because of pain anymore, but because even now he still had the power to make me feel something. Edward caught up with me in the hallway. Are you okay? I nodded. I said what I needed to say. For the next few days, things were strangely quiet. I started baking again. Cynthia got a new job offer. Edward proposed to her. She said yes. There were small joys, little moments of light. But deep inside I knew it wasn't over. And I was right. 2 weeks later I got a letter. No stamp. No return address. Just my name on the front. I opened it slowly. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Mary, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer alive. But there is something I must confess before I leave this world. My heart stopped. I never told you the truth about that night 26 years ago. The night that changed everything. I dropped the letter. The room spun. Cynthia rushed in. Mama? What is it? I pointed to the floor. It's him. He wrote me a letter. About a secret. Edward picked it up and read silently. His eyes widened. Mary, he whispered. It wasn't just abuse. He did something else. Something dark. I grabbed the letter again and read the next line. I buried something under the tree in the backyard. You deserve to know the truth. Dig there, and you'll see what I've hidden all these years. That night, Edward and I went to the backyard with a shovel. The moon was full. The air was heavy. We dug under the old mango tree where I used to pray in silence every time Daniel beat me. The shovel hit something hard. A small metal box. I reached down and pulled it out with shaking hands. Inside were photographs. Old ones. Of a child. A baby I had never seen before. There was also a hospital bracelet. And a birth certificate. The name on it made me gasp. It was my daughter's name, but not Cynthia. It was another name. Another daughter. Born 1 year before Cynthia. I couldn't breathe. The name on the birth certificate stared at me like a ghost. Emily Grace Walker. Born in the same hospital where I had delivered Cynthia, just 1 year earlier. I held the faded certificate in my hands, trembling. What is this? I asked aloud, though no one could answer. Edward leaned over my shoulder, speechless. Cynthia stood frozen behind us, her hands over her mouth. I sat on the grass as tears began to fall down my face. Why didn't I know I had another daughter? Edward knelt beside me. Maybe the letter says more. I pulled it out again and unfolded the last page. I made a terrible mistake, Mary. You were pregnant before and I lied. I told you the baby died during birth. But the truth is, I gave her away. I didn't want the burden. I didn't want another child. I forged the hospital papers and told the staff to send her to the adoption home down the road. I paid them off to keep it quiet. You were sedated. You never knew. I couldn't stop shaking. A part of me shattered into pieces. All those years, 26 years of pain, of confusion, of feeling like something was missing in me. I thought it was because of his abuse. But it was more. He had stolen my child. He had stolen my first daughter. I looked up at Cynthia. She was crying now too. I have a sister, she whispered. I nodded slowly. And I never got to hold her. Never got to name her. The hospital bracelet in the box had the name Baby Girl Walker. January 2nd, 1986 written on it. I had no memory of giving birth on that date. Because I was unconscious. Why would he do this? Cynthia whispered, her voice full of grief. Because he was a monster, I said. And I let him be one under my roof. I stood, fire in my bones. But not anymore. Not one more day will I carry the weight of his evil. We went inside and contacted the hospital, the old adoption home, and started a search for Emily Grace. Days passed. Then weeks. One morning, Cynthia got a phone call. I heard her gasp. Yes. Yes, I'm her sister. Please, can we meet? She hung up and turned to me, her face glowing. Mama, we found her. I couldn't speak. Tears filled my eyes before I could even ask what she was like. She's a nurse, Cynthia said. She's married. She has 2 daughters. And she wants to meet you. We arranged the meeting for the next weekend. The moment I saw Emily step out of the car, I knew her. Even without ever seeing her before, I knew. She looked just like my mother. Like a piece of my soul had returned home. I walked toward her slowly, afraid it might be a dream. But she ran to me and wrapped her arms around me so tightly, I could finally cry without shame. She whispered into my shoulder. I always felt like something was missing. Now I know it was you. We spent hours talking. She showed me pictures. I told her stories. Cynthia and Emily cried in each other's arms like they'd known each other forever. Something healed inside me that day. Something whole. Later that evening, when Emily had gone back to her home with promises to return soon, I sat in the living room with Cynthia and Edward. Cynthia turned to me and said, Mama, you're free now. And for the first time in 26 years I believed her. Because the silence in my house no longer echoed with pain. It echoed with love. And laughter. And second chances. Never stay silent in pain just because the world tells you to endure. Abuse doesn't get better with time. It only grows. If someone is hurting you, especially someone you trust, speak up and fight for your peace. And never let anyone steal your identity, your family, or your worth. You deserve love. You deserve truth. You deserve freedom. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm Grandma Mary. And I'm finally free.